Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and it's my great pleasure today to have a special guest, singer-songwriter Rodney Brown. Welcome, Rodney.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Nice to be here.
I've known Rodney, I've known you for over 40 years, and we've been friends and gone fishing and different things together.
Yeah.
And it's so great to have you because I feel like you're kind of part of the memory, kind of the presence of Thunder Bay. I took my grandkids to the library there, to the museum last week, and there was a little section on music, and your name was the first name that people say, "Hey, music, Thunder Bay, Rodney Brown." So
cool.
I'm all excited.
Wow, cool.
So tell me a little bit about your growing up. Did you grow up here in Thunder Bay? What was that like?
Yeah, I grew up in Westford in Fort William. Lived in a house right beside Canada Car, it was called in those days, and
Bombardier nowadays.
Yeah, that's right. And used to sell Kool-Aid to all the guys from Canada Car when they came off work, and because we lived next door, and went to Crawford School, and my dad secured a pretty good job, so we moved more downtown Westfort, and but yeah, had lots of fun growing up in Thunder Bay those days, and started playing music when I was really young. You know, my dad always had his guitar at family functions, and of course wanted to be just like my dad, and I loved the songs that he sang.
What kind of songs did he sing?
You know, he sang songs that told stories, really kind of that captivated me, and stories about railroad engineers, hobos, blind orphans, you know, and I just entranced by the stories and the music. And so when, you know, as I grew up, I was pretty immersed in music and the neighborhood, and my sisters also sang, and I learned to sing three-part harmonies when I was a little guy, and we sang at community functions when I was younger, and at church, and the old gospel songs that we did. Yeah, and I don't know. I just love Thunder Bay a lot, and you know, I love music a lot, and luckily I've been able to pursue you know, a career here and stay here, and honor my Westfort roots. You know, it's you know, I've done albums about Fort William, and just I'm totally immersed in knowing about my local community as it is now, and the history of it.
So you know, I followed your career for over these 40 years, and I got a pile of CDs and tapes at home and albums, and I've seen you tell stories in your songs that, you know, some of your music really appeals to me because I really like the vocals. I really like the stories, I guess, like you did as a kid with your dad.
Yeah.
And I was just listening to one of your earlier albums as I drove in. And many of your songs are very much have a message as well. I mean, the one, the Union, I Am a Union Man.
Yeah.
Now, where does that come from?
Well, it actually came from a book called The Camerons, and it was about a Scottish family who, during the Industrial Revolution, before the workers became organized, or during this early time, and the father of the family, he was one of the very first organizers in England and Scotland, actually. So that was the direct thing, but I also I don't know, since a young age I've been socially aware, I guess, of workers and their rights and people in general, and often felt how unfair it is, you know, income disparity, how people could be so rich and others can starve, you know.
Yeah, working 12 hours a day,
Yeah.
you could still be starving.
Yes.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. And, you know, it's a little bit better nowadays, but, you know, it's still, you know, it's still a fight that's going on. And we see it in our own community here recently with people going on strike, and we see the income disparity between and I've always believed in equal work for equal pay, and I think a dishwasher should get paid as much as the manager.
Oh my God, you're damn radical. So another song on that record was Kaministiquia, about a river that flows through town and through our countryside, collects a lot of the drainage in our watershed. And it's got a lot of different parts to it. I mean, this is 40 years ago or more, I guess you wrote that song.
Yeah.
There was a real message there about the interaction, for me, between modern civilization and nature.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that song goes back, I wrote that song in Kaministiquia, actually, in a little cabin, while I was living with some friends out there in a communal type of situation. And I had lots of time to play my guitar in the wintertime. There was not much going on. And I wrote quite a few songs back in about '76. And the Kaministiquia song goes back to my youth, living beside the Kaministiquia River, playing on the river. And what I remember mostly is all the fish, not all the fish, but seeing fish float by the river with their bellies up, with their white bellies. And as kids, we would just throw rocks at them. And remember, even at that age, seeing the headlines in the paper, Cam River polluted. It has been cleaned up since then. But, when I lived out in Kaministiquia, we would go swimming out at Silver Falls, and just so impressed by the river and how beautiful it was. But at the same time, as the river went down through Thunder Bay, it changed, So I just wanted to talk about that, that difference and how we idolize and beautiful, our rivers are beautiful, but we don't really see them, when they go through cities.
And it feels like, in a way, you've kind of been the conscience of Thunder Bay a little bit, and I think have participated in that change, where we now see that river is more valuable, and now we have pollution controls, we have more awareness of what we're doing to our environment. Do you feel that? Do you feel that you've got a role to play there?
Yeah, I think, musicians, and when I, excuse me, when I first started to listen to other singer-songwriters when I was younger, it got me to Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan got me to Woody Guthrie, and songs that they were writing about their communities. Dylan was writing about the hardships that they were having in Minnesota with the Iron Range, and
same challenges we've had here.
Exactly. With and Woody Guthrie singing about the people in Oklahoma, and I kind of thought that was really cool, and I thought I was influenced by that, in my own community here, and I think we were all, no matter what we did, we were all caught up in this baby boomer generation that was coming up, and we had all these new radical ideas, and which weren't so new and so radical, but we thought they were, and I think we did make a difference, and we were all kind of caught up in making the world a better place, more meaningful.
Hang on right there. We have to take a short break, but we're going to come right back and find out some more of these radical ideas. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is singer-songwriter and historian Rodney Brown. Welcome back, Rodney.
Nice to be here.
So, we were talking about a number of roles, I guess, you play in society. One is historian, and some of that history is old history, and some of it is history that's happening right now. Right. We talked a little bit about kind of your belief in the kind of equality of society. And you've been involved in a number of different things, using your music with theater, with video. You went to Elliott Lake to spend some time working with the folks there. What was going on there?
The mines had just closed down. This is going back a few years, more than a few.
So this is a uranium mine in Elliott Lake.
Yeah, uranium mine in Elliott Lake. And Camp Theatre had done a play about it, and that kind of drew my interest to it. And then Magnus Theatre sent their theatre education director, Karen Drazy, and myself to help the unemployed miners express themselves artistically, you know, through theatre and plays. Mine was through songwriting, and it was pretty cool. I was in a room with about half a dozen unemployed miners, and they all had stories to tell about lung disease and the dangers of uranium mining, and just how now, you know, they were so used to making really good money, and mine's gone, and what do they do now? They're poor health, no employment. So it was a sad, you know, a very sad situation, and I was really happy that I could be there and help these miners express themselves musically through the songs. And I was really impressed. You know, they weren't musicians, they weren't singers. You know, and I kind of guided them through the process, used their words, and they did sing, and it was really cool hearing these guys sing about their lives as miners and how it affected them. So it was an excellent project, and I've done a few projects with adults like that. Done a lot of work in schools, helping, as you know, helping students write songs, and the community here in Thunder Bay has just been awesome. You know, the school boards and community groups and all kinds of people have had me come to perform or to help write songs or do music workshops, and it's just been really great here for me.
So, in a way, you learned as a kid about the power of stories in songs.
Yeah.
You've written songs about your own stories, but then you've worked with others to help them tell their stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm remembering now the song about the flooding of Lac Seul.
Yeah.
I've been up to Lac Seul a couple times fishing, and I love the bush and the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened there in Lac Seul?
Well, this was going back to the early 1900s, 1930s, up to the 50s. They started flooding the land. They had one major water diversion, so instead of I forget the name of the river, but instead of it going to the Arctic, they made it come down to supply hydro, apparently from Manitoba. And they didn't tell anybody. And the water rose, I think, 10 to 12 feet. So people's homes, there's the story when I was playing at the Trout Forest Music Festival, there was a booth. They had set up a booth, and they had the story there, and told about a man who had gone to town to sell his furs, and he came back a couple of weeks later to his camp, and everything was floating. You know, the trees didn't look the same, nothing looked the same. All his belongings were floating on the water, and that was just one story. You know, many stories of just how blatantly they disregarded people's lives, and it was just incredible. You know, at that time that they could do that. So you know, that's a story that everybody needs to know, and we have to remember that. And you know, that's why we have reconciliation nowadays. It's because we did some pretty terrible things. We as settlers, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a video on YouTube about that, and shows some of the people and the places there in Lac Seul.
I had the school invited me to come up, and I did a show for the school, and I did a show at night, and largely because of that song. The principal of the school really liked the song and thought it would be great for me to come up there and play. So it was really great to be there and see this place, you know, that I'd heard about, and see it firsthand. Yeah.
I feel like you're in a way such a good position. You really love this town. You love this area. You've studied the history and seen how the settlers have really interacted with that environment. Whether it's Elliott Lake or Atikokan, where the mines shut down and the people are left.
Yeah.
Whether it's disregard of whoever's living there to be able to tap the natural resources because someone else is making the decision some far away.
Yeah.
What are you left with, after 45 years of thinking about that and telling those stories? Where are we at? What?
I think there's a lot more stories to tell. I've written a few. There's a lot more out there, and I was just talking to a friend of mine. There doesn't seem nowadays, and there could be, because I'm not really in touch with all the new music that's out there and what's there. But it doesn't seem there's as many protest songs nowadays. And, But yet, we definitely have things, and we have people that we could protest against. Politicians, and so I'm not sure where to go from there. I think the troubadours will always be around. They will be telling the stories, giving the news through songs. That will always happen, but it seems to have subsided a bit to me. I think we're more interested in having fun and dancing than perhaps changing our consciousness about certain things that we've done. Stuff, yeah.
So we need to play some more of your songs
you
more
go.
often to kind of remember.
There's an idea, Steve.
Well, it's funny, and I know in my volunteer work, it feels like people are a bit more frightened of their future these days, and are a little bit less willing to rock the boat,
Right.
to stand up and say, "Hey, there's something wrong here." Sometimes it feels like they're just happy, just hanging on to the little bit they have.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, I know it's. I have, my being a self-employed musician, I could speak out. I don't have to worry about my job too much. I may not get invited to sing at, the Walmart managers convention, I don't, or something like that. I don't know.
But you've been invited a lot of places, which is great.
I have, and it's not unusual for musicians to have political ideas, and a social conscience. I'm not sure why artists may have that more than others. Maybe it's because they're looking for expression, they're looking for the stories, and they're actually, doing that work.
We're going to come back
Sure.
with one more story after the break. Please stay with us because we have a little bit more about our hometown. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is hometown hero Rodney Brown, singer-songwriter. Welcome back, Rodney.
Nice to be here.
Rodney, I want to get you to talk a little bit about, whether it's the last 10 or 15 years, you've been doing a lot of history about the fur trade. A number of albums. You got this one, this Fort William. You have the Big Lonely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, the song is so great. We got the Into the Woods, we have Northland. These are all about our homes here. But some of them are particularly really about that earlier history of the fur trade.
Yeah.
What took you there?
I was, I had a time there where I was just uninspired. I didn't know what to write about. It was a blank page, and I got Jean Morrison's book and started to read it. And
Jean Morrison is a local author, historian who's passed now.
Yeah, she's passed away now. But she was the historian at the fort for about 15 years, and
at the old Fort William.
Yes, yeah, and she kind of helped put the fort together, an expert in that history. And so I read her book. I first of all became kind of interested in William McGilvery. Growing up in Fort William, I didn't know who William was, and so it was it was really interesting to find this guy.
Fort William.
There you go.
William McGilvery.
William
Oh my
McGilvery.
gosh, there we go.
and just, you know, the time that he spent here, and, you know, our geographic location in the center of all these major waterways, and just how important that was, and just the numbers of people that passed through here, and also the kind of person that he was. To me, maybe it's some guilt going on, but looking for a nice European explorer.
There's got to be one.
And it seems to me there was a few in the Northwest Company who came here. They followed the French tradition. They intermarried. They had children with the First Nations here. This was the very beginning of the Métis, and the pride even then that McGilvery had for his children and all the other children of the fur traders to kind of carry on, you know, this integration process.
It was more than just trade here now for
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
It was establishing family.
Yeah, establishing family here, and, you know, the beginnings, the seeds of nation building. Granted, all the explorations that they did were for the king, you know. So this was the beginning of the end for life as the indigenous people here knew it. It was, but
What time frame was that?
McGilvery came here in 1783.
1783. Okay.
Yeah, and he was 19 years old, and it was maybe 10 years later that he became director of the Northwest Company. And he made peace with the fur traders. He brought Alexander Mackenzie back into the Northwest Company. He was around the same age as David Thompson, and you just felt like they had a real sense of community and wanting to do great things, you know, and which they did. I mean, these, like David Thompson, for example, learned almost every language of the First Nations as he traveled and became immersed in the culture. Partly he had to do that to gain their trust and to find out what river to take next and where to go. But just some really incredible stories of these guys. And
so David Thompson was the kind of the first settler type that
Yeah.
made it across the country in Canada. Is that right?
That's true, yeah. He was actually a settler. He stayed here with his wife, Charlotte Small. They had 13 children, I believe, and they lived their days out in Montreal. He's regarded as one of the world's greatest explorers and map makers. But, you know, just learning, I knew this stuff was there at the fort, but I didn't know all the details. And to have Jean write it in print so I could look at it and refer back to it and go, oh, okay, that's really interesting. You know, how did they transport all this stuff? And what were the First Nations interested in? Like, why did they take part in it? And, you know, hearing about how when the Hudson Bay Company took over and how the local tribe here, they went to the Great Hall and the chief said, the Blackbird told us of a great change that was coming, and he apologized to McGilvery for not everyone coming because they were scared. The Blackbird had whispered of great change, and when the Hudson Bay Company took over, Fort William lost its status as the headquarters for the trade, and it moved north. And it was very hard. People depended on that trade that lived here, the local people, and, you know, and it was just gone, and they'd grown dependent on the trade. So it was really hard, very much hard times.
And you know, like your record, the Fort William, you're telling stories in a way from a number of different perspectives as well. It seems. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
the Big Lonely feels like you're a voyageur out on
Yeah.
Lake Superior, you know, and La Veronde is like the fella that runs the pub, or what?
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
at the fort.
sure, yeah.
You know, and then, you know, all the remains. Now that's like all the street names over there in East End
Yeah, yeah.
are all from.
Yeah, they're all partners, fur traders of the Northwest Company, most of them. And yeah, it was interesting to envision where the fort was originally in the East End, and it was too bad when the railroad came. They took down the very last building, the very last stone building that was there. It was quite a large building, and the railroad just leveled it. And progress is like tearing down stone walls on High Street. It's like just remove it and put up a concrete one.
So Rodney, we're in our last 30 seconds.
Sure.
One of the things that you've done and we've talked about is you work with other groups of folks to help them tell their stories.
Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you around some of that, how do they do that?
You can go to my webpage. I'm pretty easy to find. I think if anybody goes online, I'm a regular Facebook user. So
And your webpage is
rodneybrown.ca.
Okay.
And you can just search my name, and I'm sure you'll find me.
That's it. We're out of time.
Okay.
Rodney, thank you so much for coming on. Rodney still plays
Yes.
all over town.
Yeah.
Stay posted, check his website, and thanks so much for watching. Stay safe.